Everyone loves to watch mysterious and unexpected stories, mostly out of pure curiosity. The shocking part comes when such stories turn into a complete reality with real consequences. The cases that I am about to tell you today are both mind-boggling and vicious, with twists that you will never expect. Our first story is heart-wrenching and has an unbelievable resolution to a hideous crime. Melissa Mooney. August 6, 1999 was a normal day for a woman named Melissa Mooney. She was a secretary at the Wellington FBI office in North Carolina and was an ambitious yet very charming woman with great opportunities in her career. After an excessive struggle to save up money for her new house, she was finally ready to settle in. She was an independent woman who loved her family as well as her job, and she was finally taking the next step in owning her new house. It was the morning of August 6 when Melissa called some of her co-workers to help her move into the new house. Her co-workers said that she was excited about this new journey in her life and could not wait to finally move in. Everything was going perfect until Melissa did not show up to the office that day. Her co-workers were very surprised as they all had planned to help her move in, but there was no sign of Melissa. They tried to call her several times, but she never picked up. This raised suspicions instantly, as Melissa was a very punctual woman and would never skip a day of work without informing. Her co-workers promptly decided to go to her old house to see what had happened to her. A crew of 3 FBI agents drove by Melissa's house and found out that her car was still parked in the driveway. Something else seemed very uncanny, as there was a large boot print on her front door. The FBI agents did not waste any time and forced entry into her house. What they saw was a shock to their eyes. Melissa's nude body was lying dead on her bedroom floor. Her death had shocked the entire staff, and they wasted no time in launching investigations. New Hanover County Sheriff's Office took the case under his own lead, as it was a cold-blooded murder without any explanations, and the victim was far too close to the FBI for them to conduct an unbiased investigation. The authorities noted down the names of every person who came under close radar of Melissa. Keeping in view that she worked in the FBI office, a list of people who had left nearby prisons recently were also compiled. Everyone was interviewed and asked many questions. At first, Melissa's ex-husband was a prominent suspect, as both him and Melissa were involved in a custody battle. Melissa had even told her colleagues on one occasion that if she was ever found dead, her ex-husband would be the culprit. However, after an extensive investigation, he was ruled out as a suspect. The police was unable to find any more suspects, and eventually the murderer was not found. 2 years later, the case was reopened and Melissa's entire neighborhood was once again investigated. This time, however, something strange happened this time. A man named Tyrone Delgado, who was Melissa's neighbor, started behaving differently and was not cooperating. He had told the police at the time of Melissa's death that he had not seen or heard anything suspicious. This time, he refused to answer any questions, which intrigued the police to dig deeper into his past more. Further into the investigation, it was found that Tyrone had been a suspect of a break-in, where he had bruised a woman in a way that was similar to the marks found on Melissa's body. To add fuel to the fire, Tyrone's DNA sample matched with a hair strand found near Melissa's body. He was arrested on the spot. The jury gave a verdict against him in less than 4 hours, and he was found guilty of Melissa's murder. The intentions of the murder still remain unclear, as it was hard to figure out whether it was planned or whether it was just an unplanned killing that took place during a break-in. Marianne Vaaststra. Our next story is surprisingly similar as it explains a terrifying crime that occurred in a very unexpected way. In 1999, a small village in the Netherlands witnessed a horrific crime. Marianne Vatstra, a young and chirpy kid with a very outgoing personality. She was just another girl with big dreams of graduating from her high school and starting her own life. On May 1st, Marianne's family reported that she had not come home. The last time they saw her, when she went on a bike ride to the nearby village of Kolum. The village was not too far. It was just 20 minutes away from her parents' house, but she never made it back. This incident caused extreme anger and fear among the villagers of Veebklooster as they realized that their kids were not as safe as they thought anymore. The police started the investigation immediately, and it was not long before a day when they found Marianne's body. The sight of the crime scene was horrendous. The 16-year-old girl was brutally strangled to death. Her throat was slit, and there were traces of blood all around her body. The nature of the murder was already painful until it was discovered that she was raped and assaulted before her murder. Traces of semen were found on her body, as well as a lighter with a playboy symbol on it. The police took both the evidences and preserved it, as it would later become useful in finding her murderer. Information about this case spread like wildfire, and it soon became national news. People of Veebklooster started doing protests outside the police station to pressurize the authorities into taking significant actions. The media also got involved, which raised the expectations and the pressure on the police department. The police started their investigations in the nearby asylum, as it was close to where Marianne's body was found. This was a false attempt, as the two suspects they had been investigating did not have matching DNA. The case was going nowhere, so the police asked every man in a 650-kilometer radius to give out their DNA. The investigators believed that the murderer had to be a local because of the lighter they found, but they had no idea how difficult this case was going to be. The samples were matched to the semen found on Marianne's body, but none of them came back positive. This stopped the case from going anywhere, and it was declared a cold-blooded mystery. In 2012, this case took a shocking turn, as this was reopened under the title of Netherlands' most infamous unsolved mystery. Investigations again began, and this time, the authorities were adamant to find Marianne's killer. They asked everyone living in the village of Kolum to give out their DNA samples voluntarily. It had to be sheer luck that after 14 years of this gruesome tragedy, a result came back positive. This lit up hope in everyone, as the man who gave out his sample lived only 2.5 kilometers from where Marianne's body was found. Jasper S., a 45-year-old father of 2 children, willingly gave out his DNA, simply in hopes that he would not be found guilty 14 years after the crime was committed. But it was his worst decision ever. The police arrested Jasper from his farmhouse in Oudwoud. He had no record of any crimes, but after he got arrested, he finally confessed. He said that he forced Marianne with a pocket knife, took advantage of her, and later killed her by slitting her throat. He said that he had no idea what he was doing at that time. Jasper's trial began and he was sentenced to 18 years in prison for Marianne's murder. 14 years later, justice was finally served. 3 boys. The nature of our next story is very unpredictable, as it will make you wonder whether this really happened or was just a horrible nightmare. In 1995, at a time when people believed that their children were safe even without adult supervision, a horrific and unbelievable incident took place in Chicago's Northwest Side. It was a dark, rainy October night in 1995 when 3 young boys, 14-year-old Robert Peterson, along with his two brothers, 13-year-old John and 11-year-old Anton, were trying to find a ride to go back home. They had spent their entire day out playing and watching movies. They explored the city streets and played at two different bowling alleys. It was a usual fun day when it turned into something really unexpected. The three boys never made it home that night. The family was rightfully quite distressed, and they immediately reported this incident to the police. The very next day, police started searching for 14-year-old Robert and his two young brothers. Some days later, a salesman from the northwest side of Chicago stopped his car near a forest preserve to have his lunch. He was exploring the area when he suddenly looked down in the ditch. He saw three bodies lying down there. At first, he thought that some store had thrown away their mannequins, as it appeared quite strange from a distance. He went closer to the ditch to explore what was there and realized that it was the bodies of the three young children who were missing. He immediately called the police and reported what he had seen. The bodies of the young boys went through an extensive autopsy which determined that they were killed by strangulation. It was also found that the boys struggled before their death, as many bruises were found on their bodies as well as head injuries, which appeared to be done by a rack used in horse stables. This case sent shivers down the entire state of Chicago as protests started happening. This put the authorities under immense pressure, and they set out to find out the murderer. Hundreds of people were investigated, but no evidence was ever found against anyone. It took months of struggle when finally a witness came forward to tell that she had seen Packard picking up the three boys. This was a crucial clue that could lead them to the boys' murderer. The police investigated 970 Packard car owners, but still did not find anything that could resemble that case. Due to lack of evidence, the case went cold and it remained unsolved for a long time. This horrific tragedy was soon to be unraveled in a different light, which nobody had ever suspected. In 1977, a multimillionaire woman named Helen Voorhees Brack went missing suddenly. Brack was the daughter-in-law of the biggest candy company of that time. E.J. Brack's Sons Candy Company was a notorious candy shop that had made Brack famous. Brack was a horse enthusiast and loved riding and bidding on them, and she also had a habit of purchasing high-end and well-bred horses. It was the mid-1970s when Brack decided to buy a horse from the Bailey and Country Club stables. Little did she know that it was going to be her last purchase. Richard Bailey, who was the owner of these stables, defrauded Brack into buying third-class horses instead of the high-end ones. The stable swindled hundreds and thousands of dollars out of Brack's pocket. She was suspicious of this crime and hired an appraiser to identify the authenticity of the horses. On inquiring, the appraiser told him that the horses were worthless and of no money. This startled the multimillionaire woman when she realized that she had been defrauded of tons of money. She threatened stable owners that she would go to the authorities with this information if they did not admit of this wrongdoing. Tragedy struck when Brack disappeared on February 17, 1977. The last time she was seen was when she was buying cosmetics in a nearby clinic in Minnesota. Investigations began, but nothing evident was found that could prove her disappearance. The case eventually went cold and she was declared dead in May 1984. The police never found her body and believed that her body must be dissolved in a blast that occurred in one of her stables in 1977. After several years of disclosure, the case again reopened in 1989. The police suspected that Brack's sudden disappearance was somehow linked to the murder of three boys that occurred in 1995. This theory accumulated many suspicions and assumptions when finally the police started investigating both of the cases side by side. They started from scratch and arrested Richard Bailey in the charges of defrauding. Along with him, 23 other members were also convicted in swindling money from women, including Helen Brack. He was sentenced to 30 years of prison, but only under defrauding and disappearing Helen Brack. He finished his sentence in 2019. At 90 years of age, he finally spoke about this mysterious case and told the authorities that many people were involved in killing Brack, so it was official that she was killed by the stable owners. It was also believed that Richard Bailey had only arranged Brack's death and used assistance of other people to kill her. One case was solved, but the murder mystery of the three boys still remained unanswered. Striking information came during Brack's investigation, while the police were not even looking for it. In an interview with one of the suspects, he told the police that he had heard about a stable owner who bragged about killing 3 young boys back in 1995. His name was Kenneth Hansen, and he had opened up a stable with his wife in the 1960s. Camelot Stables ran under the name of Hansen until 1980, when they decided to sell it. The authorities dug deeper into this and talked to Hansen's co-workers, relatives, and friends. One of his co-workers told the police that one night in 1964, Hansen got drunk and confessed to killing 3 young boys. He said that he picked up 3 boys one night and took them to his barn and assaulted them. He was messing around with the boys until he strangled Robert Peterson to death. He then confessed that he had no choice but to kill the rest of the brothers too. In 1972, Hansen was arrested and charged with a blast and an arson that destroyed one of his friend's stable business, killing 36 of his horses. He was also charged with the murder of those 3 boys based on the confession the police had found. Later, it was discovered that 7 months after the boys had been murdered, a fire had erupted in the Idle Hour stables that may have been deliberately started in order to destroy evidence of the boys' murder. It was sheer bad luck that back in 1995, Hansen was investigated but was never suspected. He had moved on with his life, married and had kids, but as the saying goes, justice always finds its way. And it got to Hansen too. Hansen went on trial and maintained his innocence the entire time. The jury blamed the murder of the 3 boys on a very infamous serial killer, John Wayne Casey, who was living in Chicago during the boys had been murdered. It was later revealed that in 1995, he was only 13 years old and was not capable of convicting such a gruesome crime. Finally, the trial again began and Hansen was found guilty of the boys' murder. He was sentenced to 200 to 300 years in prison. The story came to its final end when Hansen died of natural death in prison. The 2 most intimidating stories finally got their closure. If it was not for Helen Brack, the murderer of the 3 innocent boys would never be found. Jacob Wetterling. Our next story is as horrible as the previous ones. Among many cold-blooded mysteries, this tragedy was the hardest to believe. Jacob Irwin Wetterling was born on February 17, 1978. He was an ordinary young boy with a charismatic personality. He was very outgoing and social with his friends. He loved playing sports and was enthusiastic about every game he ever played. Nobody knew that the moments of his happiness would be this short-lived. On October 22, 1989, Jacob went biking with his younger brother Trevor and their friend Aaron. He loved riding bikes, so it was a casual activity for him. They traveled on their bikes and had fun. It was finally time to come back home when they decided to go to a convenience store to buy a videotape. This shopping spree was soon going to turn into Jacob's last one. The boys came out of the store, took their bikes, and were riding towards their homes. When out of nowhere, a man wearing a mask appeared with a gun. He told the boys to leave their bikes and lay face down on the ground if they did not want to be killed. and then he asked each boy how old they were. Jacob's brother was the youngest among them. He was only 10 years old while the rest of the boys were of age 11. The masked man asked Trevor to run away and not look back. If he did so, he threatened to shoot him on the spot. Jacob and his friend Aaron were still lying face down on the ground when the man asked Aaron to run as well. He freed Aaron and took Jacob away with him. This was the last time anybody ever saw Jacob. Trevor and Aaron ran back to their homes and told the entire scenario to their parents. It was quite haunting and unbelievable to hear, so the family immediately reported it to the police. The investigation began and the police traced out the man Trevor and Aaron described, but it took a while to figure out what had happened to Jacob and where he was. The investigation began and the police traced out the man Trevor and Aaron described, but it took a while to figure out what had happened to Jacob and where he was. On December 16, 1989, the man was discovered. His name was Danny Heinrich, a local citizen of the country. He was investigated and his DNA was also taken, but no solid evidence was found against him. Therefore, he was released and Jacob's body was never found as well. This led the case to be cold for the next 25 years. Jacob's family had no idea what had happened to their son and whether he was dead or alive. For the next 25 years, they had spent their lives in complete misery as there was no closure for them. In May 2014, things took a complete turn when Jacob's case was reopened again. Danny Heinrich was again taken into custody as he was charged with the possession of child pornography in October 2015. On September 1, 2016, Heinrich finally confessed that he had murdered Jacob and also gave the location where his body was buried. He also testified that he had a fetish for having sexual relations with young boys. Therefore, he raped the 11-year-old boy before he murdered him. His trial began and he was charged with the murder of Jacob Wetterling and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After 25 years of complete darkness, Jacob's family finally found the truth. Helen Prizzinski. Our last and final case will make you tremble, as it's amongst the most twisted cases you will ever hear. In 1980, a 21-year-old woman named Helen Prizzinski was a senior at Wheaton College in northern Massachusetts. She was a bright and intelligent student and was involved in many different educational activities that took place on the campus. She had a liking for covering different stories and knowing the truth behind it, and so she was an active member of the council resident hall of her college. She desperately wanted to become a journalist. It was her lifelong dream. Things were going exciting for Helen as she got a call for an internship in a news department in Colorado. On New Year's Eve, she went to Englewood, Colorado to give an interview. Later, she stayed with her uncle and aunt who also lived nearby. She stayed there the entire period of her internship. On January 16, Wednesday was a usual day of work for Helen. She got off from her internship and took her usual commute to her aunt's house. She used to take a bus from Denver to Englewood, which would account for an early arrival to her destination. She was a very responsible and punctual woman and had never been late. But on that day, something unusual happened. She did not reach home at her usual time. It was 10:30 at night when her aunt finally called the Englewood police to report her niece's sudden disappearance. Investigations began, and the police suspected that Helen's disappearance can be linked to the sexual assault cases that were happening in that area. They kept searching for Helen throughout the night. The next morning, a woman was driving in her car near some deserted plains of Englewood when her kids insisted that they saw someone lying in the fields. The woman spotted a road operator nearby and asked him to take a look at the fields. The pair went up to the fields and found a woman lying dead and naked. It was Helen Prizzinski. The autopsy revealed that she was sexually assaulted before her death, and this pointed out that the case was related to the many others that were happening in the area at that time. The police started their thorough investigations and interviewed many people on the normal commute of Helen. A witness who came forward said that he had seen Helen leaving the bus between 5 and 5:30 on the day of her disappearance, and that she had also seen the man who abducted her on her way home. A hypnosis was conducted on that woman to trace out the face of that man. It was successful, and later flyers were spread out in the entire city with his face to identify the culprit. Nothing seemed to work as the case kept hitting dead ends. Eventually, it was closed with no certain evidence. When Helen Prizzinski was killed in 1980, the possibility that the executioner had left behind DNA that could recognize him was still a very long time from now. By 1998, that future was in full blossom. That year, Tony Spurlock, presently Douglas County Sheriff, Holly Nicholson Cluth, the current Under-Sheriff, and Captain Charge Walker reopened the examination. They framed a team that included agents from the Englewood Police Department and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation who went through all the proof, discovering that none of it had at any point been tried for DNA. That testing yielded a hereditary profile of the executioner. Be that as it may, after it was transferred to the FBI's Combined DNA Index system, an archive of millions of profiles from both known hoodlums and inexplicable violations, there was just dissatisfaction. There was no match. The case was rethought again in 2000, 2005, 2010, and 2013, when that DNA prompted 8 ladies who might have been connected with the executioner. The subsequent examination went no place. In 2017, investigators started one more glance at the case, expecting a leap forward, beginning with its boundless use to tackle violations in the last part of the 1980s. Criminal investigators found DNA both tempting and overcoming. Assuming they put a profile in the FBI information base and got a hit, or tried an example from a crime location against a suspect and got a match. Assuming they put a profile in the FBI information base and got a hit, or tried an example from a crime location against a suspect and got a match, they were quite often on the doorstep of settling the case. On the off chance that they didn't, it was simply one more piece of proof that they didn't squeeze into the riddle before them. This happened even as science walked on, and DNA could be extricated from increasingly small examples, ultimately even from a hair, and afterward from a couple of skin cells. However, even with those advances, cases frequently slowed down when they couldn't track down a match. Then at that point, genealogy came into existence, with many individuals testing themselves, expecting to find out about their parentage, find tragically missing family members, or observe birth guardians. What's more is that examiners understood that regardless of whether they couldn't take DNA from a crime location, they could still utilize the database to track down the executioner's family members. The detectives took the DNA available from the crime and transferred it into an open-source data set, like GED Match. That is the work that Douglas County Sheriff Specialist Shannon Jensen sought after. Starting in 2019, it tends to be overwhelming. When Jensen initially ran the executioner's DNA through the lineage site GED Match, she got 3,000 hits. 3,000 individuals who shared a hereditary association with the man criminal investigators had been chasing after almost 40 years. Afterwards, she focused on a man named William White Jr., a man with a background marked by degenerate sexual conduct. The DNA from Helen's body and clothing was analyzed against White's, but once again, there was no match. Then at that point, Jensen directed her concentration toward his more youthful sibling, Curtis Allen White, a man who'd been convicted for assaulting a lady at knife point in Arkansas in 1975, who'd come to Colorado in 1979, and who'd began going by another name in 1982, James Curtis Clanton. As Jensen put together the details of his life, she was sure she had found Helen Prizzinski's killer. She went to Lieutenant Tommy Barella, an experienced officer new to cold case work. She only needed his DNA. She finally took it, and it was a match. Finally, he was arrested, and later he confessed to killing Helen. On July 1, 40 years after Helen's death, he was finally sentenced to prison, serving the long overdue justice to Helen's family. Such types of cases seem hard to believe and totally made up, but these are the dark realities of life. To keep in touch with more mystery cases, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you never miss out on our daily updates.